It was the most wide open season in the history of the league. I mean, that's just a fact. There's no doubt about it.
The league is in a great spot. These teams, these championship teams, the Minnesota Wind Chill are in a great spot.
Let's be real. We shocked the world tonight. These guys know how to fight, and that trophy was nice and heavy, and that felt good.
We haven't proved anything yet. We've been here several times. We are the underdogs.
We've been grinding for a long time. I don't feel like we got over the hump.
You're going to win that over and over, one matchup at a time.
You've got your favorites. You've got your underdogs. This is why they play the games.
Over the top! Skies over Grayson Center!
To the end zone for the score. Oh my goodness.
Battle at the buzzer, and you better believe Jeff Babbitt lives for the moment. Glory have defeated the reigning champions.
Welcome back. It's Swing Pass. I'm Adam Ruffner. That is Evan Lepler, and we are proud to bring you the start of the 2025 UFA season. It is finally here, nearly 8 months since the last game of professional ultimate frisbee in this league was played, and now finally we've got some action. We've got star debuts on new teams across the league. We've got some really riveting matchups between top title contenders in the league. Evan, you've been doing fantastic coverage for the past few weeks. You had a fantastic Tuesday toss that dropped yesterday. We are recording this on Wednesday, April 23rd. You were previewing the big rollout and kind of all the basics you need to know going into this new campaign. How you doing, man? What you thinking about heading into your big weekend? You've got 3 broadcasts to prepare for. What's going on?
Yeah, it's nice to finally have games to call, games to watch, games to analyze. It's good to be back with you, Adam. The season, it's been a big build-up toward it. And, I mean, look, it's our job to be excited about it, but we don't really need to work very hard to be excited because there are so many fascinating storylines. And, you know, the ironic thing is the last time we saw live game action was championship weekend when the story was the wind chill. I mean, you know what I mean.
Yeah.
We're going to pick up right where we left off because the forecast as of a couple of days ago for Oakland was chilly and windy. And Vegas is also supposed to be pretty windy in the afternoon. I've been told the wind usually dies down in the evening in Vegas, but expecting a messy opener between New York and Oakland, which maybe plays in the Spiders' favor. Like, they often have messy games at that stadium at Fremont, and they know the wind tunnels. They know how to play in them, perhaps a little bit better than New York does, and we'll see how the Empire fare in those windy games. Now, the Empire have a lot of size, so that works in their favor. Like, usually bigger teams are good in those conditions where you just kind of have to rely on that length and physicality in some ways. But yeah, really excited. Crossing my fingers that the travel gods smile upon me this weekend and get me to San Francisco tonight, and then Vegas on Friday morning, and then Atlanta on Saturday morning, and hopefully home on Sunday and see my family again. Hopefully they remember who I am because it's going to be a great weekend. And, you know, like going into it, we know there's going to be surprises. Mm-hmm. So, like, trying to prognosticate, like, what are we going to be surprised by? Is it going to be Oakland upsetting New York? Could Houston shock Austin? Could Philly absolutely stun a DC Breeze team that's a little shorthanded? Like, who knows? Maybe Montreal, Ewing Furies, Toba DeCrana in Boston. So there are a lot of juicy storylines, and maybe we get chalk with all the top teams presumably taking care of business. It didn't even mention the game of the week between the Shred and the Hustle. So yeah, lot of intriguing action. Excited to dive into it all here with you now and see it unfold this weekend.
So we've got a 7-game slate heading into week 1. Let's start chronologically and actually with one of the more peculiar matchups, first time ever between New York and Oakland, and also on a Thursday night. You know, we're kicking off this season a little bit earlier than normal. Games getting going tomorrow night on Watch UFA TV. Be sure you get your subscriptions now. But that Empire Spiders matchup, that has been one I've had circled on my calendar personally for a long time. You know, Empire, of course, coming off of kind of their dynastic run from 2019 through 2023. Last year, still making the playoffs, but getting bounced out of the first round by Boston, and their former captain, Jeff Babbitt, now the two-time reigning MVP with the Glory. New York, still one of the best squads in the entire UFA, but I feel like, as we've kind of talked about in the show, there has been a slight decline in some of their play in recent games. And they're going up against this Oakland team that was very much a playoff contender last year, but never really quite cracked into title contender territory. This year, though, they've added some really nice pieces to one of the youngest and most athletic rosters in the entire UFA. A lot of those guys will be making their debut on Thursday night against the Empire. I'm talking about Nick Tolfa, Adam Reese, and Leo Gordon in particular, coming over from Revolver leadership on the local amateur club team. They're going to bring in a lot of skills and a lot of talent. And I think when they mesh with the existing core, which features, all UFA member last year, Evan Magsig, one of the top throwers in the league right now, Raquan Adkins, who was second in the league last year in receiving yards per game, as well as Walker Frankenberg and a host of other young and exciting athletes. This Spiders team is going to be able to punch with the Empire in a way that I think is going to be really problematic for a New York franchise that, while they're bringing in, some exciting new pieces, Max Shepard, Everett Shapiro, Oliver Fay, Dmitry Suvorov, and of course the standby guard of Jack Williams, John Randolph, Ben Yott, the sort of banner carriers throughout their title runs. This New York team, they struggled out of the gate last year with speed and conditioning, and that was kind of what ultimately led to their downfall and the end of their 31-game win streak in Atlanta. Oakland feels very similar as an opponent of just being able to run this Empire team in a way that might exhaust them in a week one matchup. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I think the Spiders are definitely improved and definitely really good. Like, the question is how good, right? And how fast can they be really good? Because this New York team, from talking with Matt Stevens earlier this week, like, the Empire are in a much better place now than they were a year ago at this time. Like, I don't know if we sufficiently reported how much of a reeling feeling there was with the Empire in the aftermath of Jeff Babbitt kind of suddenly, unexpectedly stepping away, and Ryan Osgar, being kind of wishy-washy and then deciding, no, I'm not going to play this year, even though he had signed a contract to play. Just burnout made him decide he needed to take time off, and you respect that. But it also kind of dramatically shifted what the Empire were about. And dealing with that was not easy, because the preseason practices had, certain guys playing D that all of a sudden, all right, now we need you on O. And it just prevented them from finding a rhythm, I think, on both sides of the disc early in the season. And while they still were good, obviously, like, they still had a huge interdivisional win over Salt Lake. They dominated Minnesota on the road. But I think internally they knew that they just weren't comfortable. And compared that to this year, where they have kind of had their group together and been able to practice with who they expect to be on O and who they expect to be on D, like, they're just feeling way better about themselves going into the season than they were last year. Now, in the words of Matt Stevens, that doesn't necessarily mean they're the championship favorites, but they're in a much better spot. But as you said, mentioning, like, the Atlanta game is a really good reference point, because going on the road early in the season, trying to figure out who you are and your identity is against a bunch of young, athletic, hungry dudes in front of a really excited crowd that's, like, kind of hungry to get this, championship caliber team in their own house. Like, that is a hard challenge for New York to deal with. And yeah, like, I think you have to think of the Empire as favorites going into this game, but I will not be stunned at all if Oakland gets out of there with a win. And I truly do expect this to be a close game. The wild card for me with the Spiders, like I think they have the personnel to match up with New York. I really do. I think it's, do they have the continuity and the leadership? And what I mean by that is they have a new coach who's never coached a UFA game before, and Caleb Merriam. His assistant has also never coached a UFA game before. Like managing the situations of timeouts, of end of quarters, of calling the right line in the right time and clock score situation thing. Like, I mean, Caleb Merriam basically said to me earlier when I chatted with him, yeah, we know we're going to make some mistakes, but we've had some conversations and we're going to do the best we can. Like, that is where I think New York has an advantage. And in a game that could come down to, 1, 2, 3, 4 goals with end of quarters being so looming large in that, I think, that's probably why I still slightly lean New York's way. But this game has all the makings of being another classic season starter. And I do think that for folks that aren't as familiar with the Spiders and the players that they've added, like, Adam Reese, you mentioned, and Leo Gordon in particular, adding them into Walker Frankenberg and Evan Madsing on offense. And, they've got Raquan Atkins, who's a really young, crazy, talented kid. I'm excited to see Seamus Robinson in a Spiders uniform. Yeah. Like, this is a guy who's made so many big plays for the Aviators and for Cal Poly Slow in the college ranks. Like, they just have a lot of young, exciting athletes that are not going to be intimidated, that have the support of their home fans, and are ready to kind of roll the dice and see what they can do. It's going to be a lot of fun.
You mentioned that Oakland crowd, and I've heard for the past couple of years that it is one of the most underrated advantages in the entire league, coming from opponents who have to go and play there. The Spiders pack it in on the bay side there in kind of a little bit of a high school stadium, but they get a real raucous environment, and particularly in the close games late, it just feels like they're constantly feeding off of the energy of their fans. And I feel like if they can keep it close and make it into a highlight affair, a la these Spiders Summit games in recent years where Oakland has bettered a favored opponent, we could see a very similar sort of result for an Oakland team that, again, won 8 games last year, was very much the thoroughly third best team in the West Division, and I think has a big chance to showcase their upside. I agree with you. I think with the Wind, it being week 1 of the season, we might see a little bit of messiness, but that's sort of a little bit where the Spiders succeed. To your point, they haven't always had the leadership or the dispossession skills to really combat in disciplined warfare, let's say. They're a little bit more I don't know what's the right word for them, highlight friendly. They like to take their shots, they like to come at you, they like to throw their punches, and they kind of stand in the middle of the field and will take your best shots as well. And I feel like that's, a dangerous kind of dance to do with an Empire team with still this many stars on its roster, right, and the kind of championship pedigree that they have. But I mean, you talk about Raquan Atkins, that kid can just play at this point. He is one of the best, I think, single target receivers developing in this entire association. I think he's proven that over the past couple of seasons. And, his ceiling seems to be almost limitless at this point. Burns and Curry filled in, I think, really adeptly with the absence of Keenan Lawrence last year that Oakland was dealing with. My question is, who's going to slot in alongside Magsig in that backfield? Because last year it was Chris Lung. He made an all-star appearance with the team in 2022 and has been a really versatile thrower and kind of a combo receiver at times for this Oakland team in the past. He's not on the roster in 2025, and so is it a Leo Gordon? Is it an Adam Reese who can kind of plug in immediately and go against this New York defense that we are accustomed to being a vice and one of the most daunting coverage matchups in the entire association? But again, this is not the New York team that we're used to. They are down, multiple Hall of Famers on their D-line, as well as starters from last year. It's rumored that Marquez Brownlee and John Randolph might be taking more offensive possessions in 2025. I'm really interested to see what this Empire defense can do against the speed and athleticism of the Spiders team that is going to take their shots and test them early. I think that you can kind of expect maybe 20 plus turnovers from both teams, but that's been a sweet spot for Oakland as far as just kind of making things chaotic and making it an energy affair, which they do really well in.
Yeah, I think you made two really good points there that I want to respond to. Number one, I do think the dynamic of the Spiders offense is going to shift this year, as you mentioned, with losing Chris Lung.
Mm-hmm.
They're going to be more cutter to cutter than just relying on their handlers this year. You know, you add in Leo Gordon and Adam Reese into that downfield group. Like, they're capable of beginning the point in the backfield, but I think it's going to be Magsig quarterbacking with a little bit of help in the backfield, but then kind of relying on the cutters to use that space downfield. And from the New York defensive perspective, the one name that I'm hearing a lot about right now is Ben Simmons. And I'm not talking about NBA's Ben Simmons. Simmons currently questionable for the game on WatchUFAs.com Game Center, but hopefully he'll be able to go. Empire are really high on what he's going to be able to do as a young athletic kid who's just kind of been getting better and better in practice and getting blocks on some of their best players. The question I had for you, like, over the past several seasons, I'm not sure we have, and I say we as like the larger UFA community, have regarded the Spiders as a legit championship contender and kind of thought of them with the best teams in the league.
Mm-hmm.
And let's just take the West Division. Going into the season, on the Adam Ruffner personal hierarchy on opening day, where do the Spiders rank in the West? Because obviously we've talked a lot about the four top teams in the West all being really closely packed. Like, where do you have the Spiders in your mind, win or lose tomorrow, going into the season?
I think I have them right where they finished last year, which is a very punchy underdog in the playoff format, but a pretty solid team otherwise. I mean, you look at their team rankings, both offensively and defensively from 2024, they rank somewhere between 6 and 14, basically in all major categories. Again, they have good players at their skill positions. They have a decent amount of depth on defense, too. We don't talk too much about them, but, you know, Wyatt Berryman, and some of those other Spiders defenders, they're not too shabby. And a couple of names that I do want to bring up that we quietly forget about a lot of times, but are very solid veterans in the professional landscape, Eli Kearns and Jason Valley. I mean, Jason Valley has come over from the Chicago Union. Last year, he played as like a handler role in the Spiders offense, which is a complete revolution for him as a player. I mean, where he started with the Chicago franchise several years ago as kind of a defensive coverage only guy, to being somebody who can lead an offense. I mean, hats off to him for his, you know, improvement as a thrower and disc mover. And then Eli Kearns. I mean, last year in the spot starts that he had for Oakland, he was an absolute difference maker, particularly as a thrower on the D-line. You know, you talk about some of the best pure throwing forms we've seen over the last 10 to 20 years. Eli Kearns is one of those guys. He's won multiple championships in this league with other Bay Area teams from San Francisco and San Jose back in the day. And so I think that those two could maybe be a little bit of the benchmark that this Oakland team needs to get a win against New York. And again, Spiders, I think, have suffered from not getting a quality win over the last few years to really cement in our mind's eye that they deserve maybe a little bit more praise. They've had those super exciting, again, matchups at home against the Colorado Summit. But other than that, it's not like we're coming into a recap after a given weekend and raving about the Spiders and their dismantling of Salt Lake or whoever the top dog might be that they're facing up against. I think that the Spiders could really set a new path for themselves and the franchise as a whole and kind of get back to their old historic winning ways with a win against the Empire. And I'm not certain that the Empire are as familiar with how feisty this Oakland team really is under the surface. I think the Empire still kind of have the airs of, we've won a lot. We've won, 60 games over the past 4.5 seasons, 3 titles, whatever else, the most winning run this league has ever seen. They still have that core. They still have that kind of legacy. And I think that this Oakland team wants to take the shine off of them a little bit. I don't know. I'm really excited for this matchup. I think some of my X factors for New York go to Oliver Chartok, Alex Agami, and John Randolph. You know, Oliver Chartok, kind of what you were talking about before with New York's size. He was such a versatile link in that Empire offense in 2024. Can he be the same in 2025 for them? He was slotting a little bit more into the backfield in that preseason matchup a few weeks back. Who knows if that's going to be a preview for the rest of the season, but interested to see where he slots in. Agami made his debut with New York last year. Really interesting prospect for them. Can he be one of the defensive pieces that provides some coverage against this Oakland team that's just going to be run and gun against them? And then John Randolph, I think he's going to be kind of the bellwether for the, or maybe weather vane for this New York franchise throughout the season. I mean, I know in the past, and you and I, even on the MVP preview show a couple weeks ago, talked about Jack Williams, obviously Ben Yacht. You know, there's so many stars on this team. Antoine Davis. JR is the guy I keep going back to in 2025 as being, what's he going to do and what kind of outcome does that lead to for New York? So that's kind of where my mindset for Thursday.
I expect JR to play more offense this year than he's played in the past. I think bringing up Axel Agami is a great point because.
Do you like that JR is maybe going to play more offense? I'm completely split on that. I'd love to hear your thoughts.
To be honest, I wasn't keen on it when I first learned about it because I thought he was such a weapon on D. Right. But I also get it, and you know, I've joked with folks in the past that like if JR played offense, he would be the guy winning MVPs for New York, just with how the type of stats that he would put up in like the Oscar or Yacht or Babbitt or Jack type of, you know, volume role. So yeah, I think it's going to be a work in progress, and I think he's the guy that they could easily switch over to D. You know, like one of the things that Anthony Nunez always said, like with Randolph playing D, he's like, we always have the punch the glass and move John Randolph to offense in case of an emergency. Like that's a nice emergency thing to pull that you feel really good about. Like you don't usually feel good in emergencies, but that's a different case.
But they were punching a lot of glass last year, like too much.
Yeah.
Like the Mari Stoudemire fire hydrant level of glass where they're injuring themselves. You can't just keep
what a pull.
Substituting over JR and fixing all your problems. And again, I worry about that this year when they're down multiple defensive starters. Can they afford that kind of lineup switching as much? Another name I'd love to throw out, and I think is going to be a real pivotal factor in this game, Solomon Rushmeyer-Bailey, JR's, you know, college teammate, one of the best possession handlers over the past 4 seasons in this league. He continues to be somebody who I'm just eternally impressed by with his composure on the field. If this is a windy game and it does come down to just a 1 or 2 score final result, he could be a difference maker as well.
Adam, one thing to think about with New York, like a couple years ago, their starting O-line cutters on a big point could be, say, Jack Williams, Ryan Osgar, Ben Yacht, Jeff Babbitt, John Lithio, with like Elliot Chartok and Rushmeyer-Bailey in the backfield. The downfield look for the Empire is going to be way different this year, in part because I think Jack Williams is going to be playing more in the backfield. Like the Empire have basically said to me, you know, Jack Williams is the best handler in the world. It was a luxury to be able to start him downfield because we had other guys that we really trusted. But I think the Empire are going to utilize Jack more in the backfield, and they no longer have Babbitt, and they no longer have Osgar, and they no longer have Lithio, and Yacht is 2-3 years older than he used to be. So, like, what is it going to look like? Now, they still have talent, obviously, but it's just going to look and feel different, and that's something else to keep an eye on heading into the week. Like, you know, Max Shepard, Everest Shapiro, Oliver Chartok. Like, all these guys are good and experienced, but, you know, those 3 guys with Ben Yacht downfield, it's just going to be a very different feel than what we've kind of been used to with, like, the Empire's superstar look in recent years.
Yeah, and I think along with that, last year we saw with the losses of Osgar and Babbitt in particular, they lost a lot of their range and their ability to stretch defenses. You know, they're going to be integrating a lot of new pieces into this first game, and there's the wind factor as well. I wonder if we see a very basic kind of stripped down offense as we saw for much of last year from the Empire, where they were very effective. They were second in the league in offensive efficiency, but they completed the third fewest hucks per game. They really struggled to open up any kind of lead against opponents. And so is that going to be a similar kind of result here going into 2025? Are they going to be able to get Shep out on a wing and bombing it into space as he was in his preseason debut against Philly a few weeks ago? You know, he was ripping backhands to receivers downfield. Can they get good looks for these new players in their preferred spots? Or is it going to be a grind affair where it's just, you know, Randolph, Rushmeyer, Bailey, and Williams essentially playing handoff in the backfield and waiting for Yacht to release on an opportunistic deep cut? I'm really interested to see kind of how they mesh right away. I think the Spiders are a terrific challenge for them, but we should move into the other 6 games going into this week 1 slate. That's, again, the premier matchup of the 2025 season, New York at Oakland on Thursday night, April 24th. Then on Friday night, we've got 2 games on the schedule, Austin at Houston, and then New York going to Vegas in the UFA premiere of the Bighorns, as well as the premiere of Free Friday Frisbee. I know you're really excited for that. It's on YouTube. It's going to be, I think, just one of the more intriguing, you have to tune in and see what it is for yourself moments in this league in quite some time. Again, Vegas is always going to bring a little bit of sizzle, I think, to any environment that you introduce it to, especially as an expansion franchise in our league. And then this New York team, again, are they going to be coming off of a win in Oakland, or are they going to be a little bit downtrodden and exhausted and then having to go and face another team that wants some flesh off their back and could potentially make it a little bit of a grind affair? I don't necessarily expect this game to be particularly close between New York and Vegas, but I think that the Bighorns could just make it a really tough first weekend for the Empire in their 2-game slate.
Yeah, I'll tell you, Vegas is feeling good about their chances. Now, there may be some delusion in that, but I spoke with new Bighorns coach Matt Bode, former Empire player, remember, a decade ago, when he and Justin Allen and Noah Saul went up and played with Matt Stevens and Taylor Brooks and the Dross brothers and those kind of early 2013, 2014, 2015 Empire teams. When I talked to Bode earlier this week, the first thing he said, I'm like, how you feeling? He's like, I'm realistic about who we are. And then the next thing he said was, I do believe we can beat the Empire. So, you know, those are somewhat contrasting statements when you look at the Bighorns roster. And, you know, A.J. McIsaac, Brad Ellis, Alec Benton, Ryan Heiser, Brent Moore, Bryson Williams, Jason Zeidman, Chris Wilson, Harrison Tucker, Nayland Stewart, Aiden Lohman, James Shorey, the owner, Mason Zetch, Braden Distel, Joel Clutton, Stephen Poulos, Dan Vakarov, Mark Mendelovitz, Adrian Cisneros, and Jonah Erb. With all due respect to those 20 guys, it doesn't match up from a talent standpoint anywhere close to what New York's going to be throwing on the field. They're going to try to muck up the game. They're going to try to slow it down. They're going to try to use some of their athletes in space and make some plays. And, you know, I'm just excited to see what it looks like. You know, I'm with you in that I expect New York to be able to take care of business in this game. But, like, who the heck knows how the Empire are going to be feeling? Maybe after an overtime or double OT heartbreaker or thriller, however it goes the night before, and the travel that's involved. Like, you never know. Would Vegas over New York be the biggest upset in the history of the UFA? It very well might be. But that doesn't mean it can't happen.
Yes, that would be the biggest upset I think we've ever seen. I mean, what would even rival that? Can you come up with anything off the top of your head? I'm struggling over here.
Yeah, I've thought about it a little bit, and nothing like jumps out at you immediately in terms of that's a really hard question. Like,
I know. I know we don't get too many epical, generation defining upsets in that way, like a Appalachian State over Michigan, 15 years ago or whatever it was in college
yeah,
football, where it's like a different division of school upsetting a dynastic powerhouse. Like that would be, I feel like, an equivalent here. My question
yeah.
for that is, can Vegas somehow supercharge Joel Clutton into being the receiver that we've seen at times he can be? I'm thinking when Salt Lake weaponized him on offense in the 2022 West Division Championship game, and Salt Lake also kind of shifted him over into an offensive role when they struggled after they struggled out of the gate in the 2023 championship game against New York. If you remember that, Clutton got some opportunities in a receiving role and was just rampaging past New York defenders. Can they find a kind of playmaker role for him where he could have some opportunity against possibly a tired and possibly a little bit defeated Empire lineup? And is that their key to victory, or is it just kind of horde masses, hope there's a bunch of wind and chaos, and just kind of sweeping the leg of a New York franchise already on its way down and maybe placing another banana peel under their opposite leg as well? Like it just,
Yeah, I think that's it. I think that's the game plan. The banana peel plan is the plan for Vegas. Um, Dan Vakarov is a name and a guy to keep an eye on. You know, folks who've been following the league for a while may remember he's 6'5". He played for Chicago from 2015 to 2018. He just is a guy that I expect, along with Clutton, will be probably playing offense. So that's like 265, and frankly, Bode said they'll probably go both ways because they're two of their best players. And they don't have a lot of best players. They're not as deep as many other teams, and they know that. So, like Clutton and Vakarov are two names to watch. AJ McIsaac is another name to know. I expect him to get a lot of touches. Young handler who spent a couple of years at Arizona State. They're high on him. He's just 20, 21 years old, something like that. And beyond that, there's just a ton of question marks for this Bighorns team. But you know, they're going into this game to compete, and they're hopeful they're going to be able to do so. Which game do you think is going to be closer, this one or Austin, Houston?
just one more point about Vegas and New York that I wanted to make was I feel like this has to be the Big Shepherd game, right? Like this is sort of the opponent that he traditionally just goes off on, where maybe New York is kind of struggling a little bit at the margins, but you're getting a 10 score, 400 plus total yard performance from Shep, and he's looking like he does in the All-Star games, right? Like this is
That's a subtle dig. Do you realize that's a subtle dig? You're like, yeah, Shepard puts up big bucks against Detroit. Like that's what that comment sounds like to me.
That's historically factual. I mean, if you want to interpret it as a dig, I can't hold you to it. But I mean, when has Shepard been big against Chicago or Madison in important games in the past? I mean, that's been a big question mark, I think, in his career. He's undoubtedly one of the most talented and versatile offensive players in this league's history. And the numbers back that up. But he does have a tendency to get a little gun shy in the larger matchups. And so this is kind of one of those things where if they want to get some confidence into their new star addition, that is New York, I think that Vegas is a terrific opponent for Shepard to tee off on and to really get into his zone where he's just freewheeling up the sideline as a receiver, creating space, gouging underneath, and then just ripping bombs downfield. I mean, we'll see if the wind prevails in the evening there in the desert, but I don't know, man. I mean, this is exactly kind of the opponent that I think you throw the keys at Shep if he starts getting into rhythm and just let him become the road runner that he is. You know, I think, again, one of the most interesting things to follow throughout the season is, can Max Shepard be a good player on a good team? Like that's been kind of, I think, the one question mark about him over the past few seasons is that he performs terrifically for the Thunderbirds and the Pittsburgh franchises in the past, but can he be that player as, you know, the front runner on a playoff team?
I wholeheartedly agree. I think it's a really good point. This weekend is going to be an excellent litmus test to see
Right.
what Shepard's role will be and how he will fare in it.
And you asked about Austin and Houston. I do think that that's going to be a really close affair, and I also think that that's a really, really intriguing matchup just to follow generally. Austin coming off of 3 straight playoff appearances and including a championship weekend berth in 2023, but feels like they're in for a little bit of a downswing given the absences on the roster in 2025. And meanwhile, you've got this Houston team that's in year 3. I'm kind of high on them right now. I really like what they've been building down there in Texas with the Havoc. And I just feel like, given that it's a home opener, they had a terrific fan base last year at their home opener. This could kind of be finally the game that the Havoc take against the Soul, who they have not beaten in the first 2 seasons of their franchise's existence.
Yeah. Houston has not beaten a team that's still in the league, remember. All their wins have come against the now defunct Dallas Legion. So we'll see if the Havoc can change that this year. They've got some good young players. They had Dalton Smith and Chase Cunningham. I will say that while I don't disagree with your take that Austin looks like they're taking a step backward, in Soul practices and in Soul circles, they do not expect to take that step backward. They still believe they're going to be very much in the mix. That optimism could be preseason delusion, or maybe we just don't know. But we will start to find out a little bit this weekend. And then, Tim DeBile, the Madison Radicals, and Jake Spiro and everyone with the Radicals will be watching that game because both Austin and Houston are hosting Madison in interdivisional action next weekend to start week 2. So, yeah, we'll learn a lot about all those teams these next couple of weeks.
Oh, I fully appreciate that I am becoming a bulletin board material probably somewhere in the Austin Soul locker room. Hello, Stephen Najee. Big fan, as always, of what you guys got cooking down there. I'm just saying my own anxieties having seen this sort of roster turnover that they have. They have a lot of young, exciting players still. I mean, there's still Kyle Henke, Jake Radak, and a good, solid core for the Soul squad. It just feels like their line's going down a little bit right now and Houston's is going up. And I'm interested to see where that intersection point is at. But we got to keep moving on.
Hey, speaking of bulletin board material, did you get a chance to watch the Minnesota Wind Chill mini doc that went up on Monday about last year's run to the championship?
I had to spot watch it a bit. I wasn't able to watch the full 26-minute yet.
It is absolutely incredible. It's one of the best Frisbee docs I've ever seen. I loved it. It got me so pumped up for the season. If you're listening to the pod and haven't yet watched, it's well worth the 26 minutes of your time to just watch it as a preview for the season, because there was a lot of bulletin board material thrown at the Wind Chill at championship weekend last year. Some of it from me, some of it from you. The Flyers and the Breeze were both the popular picks, and the Wind Chill were the team dancing and hoisting the trophy at the end. So, yeah, bulletin board material is what it is, but just wanted to mention that because it's one of the best ultimate media videos I've watched in a long time. Shout out to Evan West and everybody with the Wind Chill that put that video together because it really is excellent.
We still got a little bit of time before the defending champions take the field, but talking about 2 other title contenders, what about this game of the week coming up on Saturday? I've been just foaming at the bit a little bit about Salt Lake at Atlanta. That'll take place again on Saturday night on Watch UFA TV. You've got this Atlanta team that has been so close but no cigar in each of the past 2 seasons, some of the most back-breaking last-second losses in this league's history. And they've got this Salt Lake team that is coming off of 3 straight 10-win regular seasons, a championship game appearance in 2023. They lose a fair amount of starters from last year's roster, and yet the Utah Ultimate scene is so regenerative, with its young talent that I kind of expect the Shred to be right where they left off. A very hungry team. They've got Jordan Kerr now in full health. He doesn't have to worry about that damaged wing that he had for much of last year that really kind of coincided with the team's downturn after that 6-0 start. Feels like forever ago at this point, but the Shred were 6-0 at one point last year and really looking like they were going to make a run again deep into the postseason. I just think that this is going to be one of the more interesting stylistic matchups too. I think you're going to see a Shred team that's a little bit looser and a little bit more run and gun on offense versus one of the league's perennially best defenses, not only in terms of their personnel, but also in their coaching. There will be a couple of absences that I feel like are of note. On Salt Lake, you've got Luke Jorgensen out, who has been a terrific center handler for them throughout their their franchise's existence. Both of the Hoffmans are out as well. They have been some very dynamic defenders for the Shred in the past. And then on Atlanta's side, Michael Fairley, Elijah Jaime, and JP Burns will all be out, but it's a very star-studded roster on both sides of the disc here for both teams. Where does your mind go in this matchup, and what are you kind of paying attention to?
A lot. Primarily, my starting thought is the symmetry with how these two teams ended their 2024 seasons. And I obviously had the privilege to be there for both of them on back-to-back nights where the road team celebrated a 1-goal win to advance the championship weekend. Carolina did it in Atlanta. Seattle did it at Salt Lake. And, you know, it very well could have been Atlanta and Salt Lake at championship weekend last year. The Shred missing the chance to play at home. Atlanta thought they had all the pieces to finally win the whole thing. And, you know, both teams didn't make the plays when it counted and came up empty and in really, really close, small margin games. So I think about that as the last time we saw them. And yeah, I think the Shred clearly have fewer established weapons coming into the season, which puts more pressure onto the guys that we know and the guys that we've come to expect to be their bell cows, like Jordan Kerr and Will Selfridge and Jacob Miller. Like, can those three guys have really good games? Mikay Jorgensen, can he take another step forward as a playmaker against an Atlanta defense that typically feasts on teams trying to go deep on them? You know,
Right.
We saw that against New York last year. Like, this is a physical, athletic, big hustle defense, even without some of the guys you mentioned with Fairley out. They're missing Frankie Fernandez, who I think is going to be one of their better defenders by the end of the year, too. But, yeah, this hustle team is still really, really stacked. We get the hustle debuts of Cameron Brock and Alec Wilson-Holiday, not to mention former Shred Sean Cannole, who will be out there. One thing I'm excited about with Atlanta, I think Adam Miller is going to play more offense this year alongside Austin Taylor in the backfield. I'm curious to see how that dynamic is going to work because both those guys have really interesting and varied skill sets and both have been really productive, you know, kind of quarterbacking their own lines in the past. How will they fit together? And yeah, I think the Shred, as I said, have to pick their spots. Like, you know, I think they're capable of staying in this game, but I think they are the underdogs going in. And, you know, we'll see. Maybe there's some Shred guys that we're not too familiar with yet. Like 3 years ago when the Shred were starting their first ever game as a franchise at San Diego, a team that had been in the last two championship weekends, you know, I think we all viewed the Growlers as the favorite going into that game. That's because we didn't know about the Jorgensens yet, and we didn't know there were three of them. Like, the Shred have a new brotherly duo, the Pughs, Sam Pugh and Kimball Pugh. Like, can those guys pull out some Jorgensen voodoo that we saw a few years ago and help surprise everybody? So Bryce Merrill's going to have this team prepared. I think he knows that they're going to face a really tough team in a hornet's nest in Atlanta. But I also think that, you know, the Shred would not be signed up for this game if they weren't confident that they could be competitive and keep it close down the stretch. And, yeah, hopefully the travel gods get me there because I would really love to see this one in person and be there for the call on Saturday.
Yeah, you mentioned the Shred's franchise debut way back in 2022. It feels like even longer ago now. and how impressive they were against the two-time reigning West Division champions at that point, the San Diego Growlers. I just remember being absolutely gobsmacked at how fast and well-conditioned the Shred were out the gate. And I kind of feel like this year is going to be a similar iteration for this Salt Lake franchise where they're going to really push speed and tempo as their strengths and just stress test opposing defenses to see if they can keep up. The problem is that I think Atlanta has the horses to run with them. One of the X factors I have circles is Lucas McClamrock. I mean, through the halfway point of last year and up until he got injured, to me, he looked like the defensive player of the year. I mean, he was taking Anderson as a matchup and shutting him down. He was fantastic in the counterattack. You know, he's a little undersized, but he is whip it quick, making his reads and accelerating towards the disc. He can close gaps like nothing. And his ability to just sort of feast on the midfield feels like it sets up so much elsewhere for that hustle defense that at this point is, again, one of the more legacy units in the league. They have a lot of veteran presence on that side of the disc, and they know how to play together. They're not going to be coming into this game looking to, I think, establish themselves in the coverages that they want to play. They're going to be looking to take the disc away from the Shred at every opportunity, kind of as you said, shutting down the deep space and making the Shred play in front of the Atlanta coverage that it sets up. The other big thing that I keep looking at, Brett Halsmeyer, man. I mean, we've been talking about it for a long time. He's kind of the inevitable thing coming in this sport. I mean, he's got every bit of skill that you'd want in a player. He can play in small spaces, and he's arguably the best one-on-one player in deep space in the entire world right now. And this Salt Lake team, if you remember, struggled to contain Ben Yacht when he was playing at his peak in 2023 in their two matchups that season. I could see Halsmeyer going for, 3 to 5 assists, a handful of goals, and just kind of controlling the space on the field that he wants. He doesn't always have to be running away from you to get the disc. I mean, even if it stalls in the air, he's just got such presence and timing and size that unless Salt Lake really figures out a couple of defenders to throw at him, I just think the big guy's going to wear them down over the course of 4 quarters. And I also keep looking at Hayden Austin-Knabb as a name that continues to develop as one of the most well-rounded offensive players in this league. And this might be the season that it really all pops for him, right? I think
no doubt
them are going to be really hard matchups for the Salt Lake defense to contain. And I'm just interested to see how each team handles set pieces. And by that, I mean rolling pulls, red zone opportunities, kind of the more situational ultimate, let's call it. Because I think last year that was a place where the Shred sometimes struggled at times. You know, they had a stretch of games where they were not at their scintillating best in the red zone. And similarly with Jordan Kerr being injured, everyone was shifted slightly out of their normal position. And so can they get back to where they were in kind of 2022 and 2023 where they were machine-like in those situational ultimate opportunities? And then Atlanta, we keep saying we're only going to judge them in the playoffs. I want to see this team right now. I want to see how they integrate all these new pieces. I want to see, Brock and Wilson Holiday and Knoll and how they fit in on this team. Are they all going to be on offense? Are they going to be rotating into different roles that we're not used to seeing? I want to see how Atlanta kind of once again handles another season of really high expectations right out the gate.
I'm sure that your old podcast host is listening or watching. What do you expect Cam Brock's first stat line to be as a member of the Hustle on Saturday?
Evan, I am so excited for my friend right now. He has been texting me every day for the past 2 weeks. I mean, he's the league's all-time leading goal scorer. He's played more games than anyone else. I mean, you talk about committed people in the UFA. There is not anyone that really supersedes Cameron Brock. I mean, he played for one franchise from 2012 until last season, from the advent of this league until last season. And now he gets a fresh pasture to roam in. He gets less of the franchise, face of the franchise, sort of exposure. He just gets to be on the team that's going to be chasing a title. And I can tell you beyond a certainty of a doubt that he is ecstatic for this opportunity and has been doing everything in his damnedest through training and just sort of focusing in on being a weapon for this Hustle team. So I don't know what kind of stat line to expect. All I know is that whoever has to run around against Cameron Brock this weekend, good luck. And if you notice now on our video feed, we did do a little bit of a jump cut. We apologize to our viewers out there. We experienced a little bit of technical difficulties. Evan then had to go to the airport and fly all the way out to the West Coast. So working with a little bit of continuity issues from the last points about Cameron Brock, but we're picking right back up where we left off, talking about opening weekend action. And Evan, I wanted to give the floor to you and to just kind of go over your last thoughts as we head into the opening of this 2025 season and any kind of potpourri items you might have for us to talk about.
Yeah, since the podcast began, I have traveled 3,000 miles teleporting from North Carolina to California. I can officially report it is a little breezy out here in the Bay, which is not too surprising considering the forecast and the location, but that will be a factor tonight for sure. We've spent so much time talking about, New York's trip through Oakland and Vegas and obviously Salt Lake and Atlanta. But like every game carries intrigue to me. There are three games, Montreal, Boston, Philly, DC, Oregon, Colorado, and you could even throw Houston, Austin in there, although Houston's at home. But like in my mind, those first three games, you have three pretty clear home favorites, and it would be very surprising if one of those teams lost. I think probably the best chance for a big upset this weekend, other than maybe Oakland taking down New York, is Houston over Austin because Houston is at home. Not a long trip for Austin, but that still matters to me. Yeah. But like at the same time, Montreal, Philly, and Oregon, this could be the last chance that they have to have a winning record this year. If you get what I'm saying, expectations externally are not that high for those three teams, but internally, there is tremendous hope and belief. Like I've talked to Christopher Tremblay-Jonca. I talked to the coach of the Philadelphia Phoenix, David Randolph. We played pickleball a couple weeks ago in Philadelphia. He's a good player. And, exchanged messages with Ben Lewis of the Houston Havoc this past week as well. And everybody in the preseason is feeling good about what they've got. And you look at the rosters, especially for Montreal and Houston, and there are a lot of guys that have various UFA exploits on their roster. Like Montreal's got a lot of good players. And yes, DeCrana carried all the gravity for them last year, but I think they're anticipating being a little bit more balanced this year. Obviously, Kenton Bonneau can become that anchor perhaps that DeCrana was. And, the most interesting story of the weekend that I'm, outside of the games I'm covering is how is Boston going to look? Because, if this Glory team is as good as some people think they are, you had them number 2 in your preseason power rankings, right?
That sounds about right.
if they are that good, they should win by double digits. You just match up their talent versus Montreal's talent. You look at the size and power that their guys have, and it's a real chance for Boston to make a statement. Their first 2 games were against Montreal before they get New York at home on May 16th, and for Boston, I don't know if they love having the first 2 games of the season against Montreal. And you certainly don't want to have this mental thing that we have these 2 preseason games before we take on the other contenders. But that's
whoa. Okay, you've had a few thoughts about the Montreal-Boston game. Calling them preseason, I think, is a little egregious. I mean, the last time they met, Montreal beat Boston. Granted, it was in a game that the Glory didn't need, but it was at the end of the season when they were in their full formation. And look, the other matchups that they had last year, I mean, the first game of the season, DeCrana's pro debut where he just went off for Montreal, Boston won that by only 2 goals, and Montreal was threatening late. I I've been chirping for a couple weeks. I think that this is an upset watch in the making. I mean, Montreal has been practicing as long as I think any franchise has this offseason. Boston, to your point, has all the talent in the world, but they're a slow starting team and they're kind of possession bound. They don't really like to get into a shootout and run up the score. So I think the margins are going to be a little trim. And again, I think this Montreal defense is a little bit undersold. You've got your aforementioned Tremblay Joncas, a great big defender, can handle a player like Jeff Babbitt, a player like Tanner Johnson-Go, a player like Orion Cable. They've got Iwan Kohoner. They've got
but there are three of those guys to handle. There are three of those guys to handle.
Totally. I'm not saying it's going to be an easy task. I'm not saying it's going to be easy. I think Montreal's got more than a puncher's chance in this particular game. If they met 5 weeks from now, or even the next game they play, Boston locks in and their talent comes to show. Okay. I'm there for the argument that they could blow them out. But this game, this week 1 matchup, I think it's going to be one of the more interesting games to watch this weekend.
Here's the point I was dancing around. If Boston is a true championship contender, they need to come out and make a statement that they are superior to a team like Montreal on their home field. Obviously, championships are not won in late April, and there's going to be a lot of roster movement and college players interspersing with their team after nationals in May. But I just there are a lot of players on Montreal that I like, and I don't think they can match up with Boston on Boston's home field. So I would not be stunned if the Royale kept it close and were competitive, because as you said, Boston can be a slow starting team. But I would be shocked if Boston didn't win this game.
I mean, I'm just saying the upset potential is there.
I am really I am measuring Boston against themselves this game, and how good they look.
Game. You called this a preseason game for Boston.
Look, in their mind, playing against Montreal doesn't carry the same sizzle as playing against New York or DC.
What does that mean? They're all individual games. And I mean, again, I think that if you're looking past this Royale team, that might be a mistake. Look, later in the season, when the talent is more developed and these teams fully flesh out, to your point, adding all the college stars, I hear you. But right now, I think at the beginning of the season, it's a lot of keep it simple, stupid tactics. You don't necessarily need the biggest lights and gun show to succeed. And Montreal's offense has Kevin Quinlan, one of the all-time leaders in assists, Jacob Brissett, who has one of the deepest bags in this league. They're a terrific 1-2 throwing tandem, and Quinton Bernard can put up 10 goals on his own. Look, there might only be, 35 total scores in this game. If one player for Montreal is getting a good third of them, again, I think it would be a massive mistake for Boston to take this as a preseason game or to test themselves against it. Royale are out for blood in this matchup. They just took, their best player from last season in DeCrona, Boston did, and is acting like they didn't, commit the heist of the century. Montreal is going to want this game as much as teams want championships this season,
Yeah. I mean, I hear you. And still, in my mind, the line is 4.5 or 5.5, and I'd lean towards 5.5. And my guess is,
disagree.
If the line is 5.5, do you think Boston covers?
I think the line should be there, but I would take the under on that. I would not expect them to cover. No.
Yeah. There's this thing with Boston that I've said before. I just don't trust them yet. They have all the pieces on paper, but they haven't shown a consistency or reliability that makes you think oh yeah, they're going to go in and take care of business. Because that's my point. On paper, they should take care of business in this game. But I'm with you in thinking that it could be more interesting. And, I'm curious to see if Montreal looks different, under Jean-Lévis Champagne, who takes over as the new head coach. Obviously, he's been with the team forever, since the very beginning, as a co-owner, as a player back in 2014. He was one of the first Canadian Ultimate players I ever met back when I covered the U.S. Open in 2013, and his Odyssey team. That this is going way back into the way back machine. But like Jean Levy was one of the first players in Ultimate, like certainly from Canada that I got to know, and I have a ton of respect for him. But he's also now the head coach of this team, and like from talking to other coaches around the league, it's very easy to be spread too thin. And coaching absolutely matters, and game planning, and like that's kind of one of the underreported stories of our league, quite frankly, is how much work goes in behind the scenes, and whether it's coaches and like whether like the head coach plus a slew of assistants, because assistant coaching staffs are definitely getting bigger, or just like captains. And some teams have like offensive captains and defensive captains that spend hours creating these scouting infrastructures and game plans and documents. And like, I've just heard stories about the amount of time that teams put into preparing for games. And I know that there's a lot that goes into coaching, from all that prep to the game management. And that stuff is really important. And we see it all the time. And, like we are, I think, generally, as people that cover Ultimate, sometimes hesitant to call out shoddy coaching. And I'm not predicting that Montreal is going to have shoddy coaching. I'm just saying it's something to look for, because for all the teams in the league, quite frankly, that have new coaches, for the Oakland Spiders too, we talked about it earlier. This is Caleb Merriam's first ever game. Like you talk to Mike Denardis, Ben Feldman, Tim DeBile about like how they manage games now compared to how they felt on the sidelines during their first year in that head coach pressure cooker. It goes crazy fast, and like there is immense value in that coaching experience and coaching poise that the Royale are not the only team lacking that going into the season, but it's also something I'll have my eye on.
Those were some of the daintiest footsteps around calling somebody a bad coach I think I've ever heard. Bravo, sir. Bravo.
I'm not calling him a bad coach. We haven't seen him coach before, but that's the point.
I hear you. No, I think it's an absolutely apt point to make, and I think it sets up perfectly, going into this opening night tonight. You have these two teams in New York and Oakland that couldn't be different from an infrastructure standpoint right now, correct? New York has to have one of the most established franchise organizational charts in the entire association, and you've got this Oakland team that I think is still developing its identity.
So, yes, and Anthony Nunez not going to be at the Spiders Empire game tonight. Family conflict. He will be in Vegas for the second game, Friday Night Frisbee. But Matt Stevens, who kind of was a co-coach, assistant coach, actively called timeouts last year. But yeah, he'll be running the show tonight. Talked to him about that earlier this week. Like, he gained experience calling timeouts last year and managing things, and he's, obviously as experienced of a UFA player outside of Cameron Brock as there is. But it's kind of similar, like, those types of game management things. I do think, like, Matt mentioned how the exhibition game helped him to get ready for that type of role, because he basically took on that head coaching role that game day to prepare for this as a solo coach. So look, there's still a lot of player leadership in these things as well, but players can only do so much in the heat of the moment. And I do think there's great value in taking things off of like player leaders' plates on that game day and just letting them focus on playing, and not sideline management, substitution management, play calling, and timeout, game situation, time and score type stuff. So yeah, something else to watch.
There's going to be plenty to watch heading into opening weekend. That'll probably wrap us up here on Swing Pass, but There are 7 games in store for opening weekend 2025 in the UFA. Evan, you'll be calling tonight's season opener in Oakland as the Empire gets set to face off against the Spiders. That'll be available live on Watch UFA TV. And then tomorrow night, 2 more games, including the 2025 premiere of Free Friday Frisbee on YouTube. You can check that out on the Watch UFA YouTube channel. And then on Saturday night, probably headlining with the game of the week, Salt Lake at Atlanta on Watch UFA TV, as well as a host of other matchups. Evan and I, as well as the rest of the league, will be watching along with you, but we will be back to recap all of the exciting Week 1 action in just a couple of days. Can't wait for this season to get kicked off properly. Let's go, Evan.
Let's go.